My first love happened in the second half of my freshman year. At a university sports event in North China, I met Cooper. Back then, he was an athlete, and I was a campus photographer at the School of Second Foreign Languages. Our story began here. I took the initiative to pursue him. Under the pretext of delivering photos, I went to his school to find him. At that time, he was a second-year graduate student. That day, to express gratitude for my photos, he invited me to the school cafeteria. Handing me his meal card, he honestly said, "I don't know what you like to eat, so feel free to choose." I gladly took the meal card and ordered garlic spare ribs, dry-fried green beans, and a glass of iced cola. Cooper ordered a bowl of pork and mushroom wonton. For some reason, looking at the wontons in his bowl, I, who usually didn't like stuffed foods, suddenly felt a craving. I picked up a spare rib and said, "Can I exchange my spare rib for one of your wontons?" Cooper laughed, "Even if you don't exchange, I can give you one." Little did I know, those wontons were really delicious. After finishing one, I couldn't help but glance at Cooper's bowl. This time, without using chopsticks, Cooper simply pushed the whole bowl of wontons in front of me. As someone who had traveled a long distance, it was the first time in my life I finished a bowl of wontons. If I had known the food at your school was so good, I should have applied to your school. Watching me enjoy the soup to the last drop and still wanting more, Cooper got up and ordered another serving for me. He then finished all the dishes in front of him. Meeting the right person is truly appetizing. And falling in love with someone can make you love everything about them, even stuffed foods like buns, dumplings, and siomai. So, if you like someone, have a meal with them first. Food can bring people closer and test compatibility. After a meal, I felt like I had known him for half a lifetime. That day, when Cooper took me to the bus stop, I directly asked him, "Do you have a girlfriend?" He shyly smiled. "I liked a girl in high school, didn't confess. Saw her once after going to college, didn't feel much. After that, I haven't been in a relationship." If it weren't for the girl's reserved nature, I really wanted to jump for joy. But I didn't want to be too reserved because I was sure the guy in front of me was my type. There's a cliché saying, but I still want to give it to Cooper when we first met and parted. Meeting you for the first time feels like meeting an old friend. Even though it was our second meeting, I had a feeling he was the person I had been waiting for. When we parted ways, I left my address and phone number. Feel free to visit our school when you have time and taste our school meals. Cooper smiled and said, "You're always welcome to come and have wontons with me." The bus started, and watching Cooper's gradually fading figure, my heart suddenly felt sour. Do you believe it? Even I feel like I've changed. To avoid leaving a lovesick impression, after returning to school, I resisted the urge to call Cooper. In fact, it seemed like I had too much to say to him. What made me ecstatic was that, just when I spent the afternoon sitting by the dormitory phone, thinking several times about calling Cooper to check in, the phone rang, and it was Cooper calling. After confirming that I had safely returned to school, he said, "Next weekend, I want to come to your school for a meal. Is that convenient?" Very convenient, especially convenient. Whenever you come, both I and our school cafeteria are convenient. After saying this, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. From my understanding of people, Cooper is also a proud person, someone very similar to me in spiritual temperament. So, for him to say that, he must have hesitated on the phone for a long time. As for me, facing such a right person, I didn't want to be reserved and proud anymore. I wanted to take that step boldly. Hugo said, "The first sign of true love is timidity in boys and courage in girls." At that moment, I suddenly felt that old man Hugo was right. My relationship with Cooper unfolded without any suspense. Between us, there seemed to be a kind of magical connection. One afternoon, due to the teacher's sudden matter, the class was cancelled. So, I decided to go find Cooper. While transferring at the bus station, I casually looked across the road. As a result, I happened to see Cooper getting off the bus. I waved frantically at him, and when he saw me, he was completely stunned. It turned out that he also spontaneously decided to come to school to surprise me that day. As a result, we unexpectedly met, not a step too early or too late. There are many more magical occurrences like this. For example, once I passed by a fruit stand and suddenly thought, what does durian taste like? Do I dare to have the courage to try it? Who knew, that day when Cooper came to school to find me, he was carrying a durian. Another time, we were eating out together. I was running late and told him he could order anything, but he must order first because I was about to starve. After the call, while on the bus, I suddenly had a strong desire to eat tomato and scrambled eggs with a slightly sweet and sour taste. As a result, when I arrived at the restaurant half an hour later, a plate of tomato and scrambled eggs was steaming hot on the table waiting for me. Cooper said, "Give it a try, the way they cook it here is unique, they add sugar." I order it every time. I was completely stunned, pinched myself, felt the pain, and only then confirmed it wasn't an illusion. With many such incidents, Cooper, being a math professional, said, "Probability can't explain our telepathic connection. This matter really needs the assistance of geography, psychology, theology." In my sophomore year, Cooper graduated. He joined a well-known internet company in Beijing as a front-end product data analyst. In just a year and a half, he climbed to the position of a product manager. You can imagine how hardworking he was. He was the type who, except for the 007 work schedule, would suddenly remember some data when we were out playing or having a meal. He would say, "Sorry, wait a moment," and start calculating with pen and paper. Only after completing the calculations would he lift his head, realizing my presence. He would apologize to me, but I thought a person immersed in something they love looks incredibly handsome. Concentration is what impressed me most about Cooper. I'm usually not very talkative, but for some reason, I always have endless things to say to him. Whether it's about career planning or the dormitory ant getting a new hairstyle, Cooper always listens to me attentively. Everything I say seems interesting to him, and he remembers it all. I was still studying German, but he gathered thick materials on all the companies in Beijing related to German majors for me. When I mentioned how the dormitory ant takes good care of me, every time he comes to see me at school, he brings a gift for the dormitory ant. When I casually mentioned wanting to learn how to make dumplings, on weekends when he wasn't working overtime, he bought ingredients and taught me how to knead dough, prepare the filling, and roll dumpling wrappers. He explained 3 different ways to fold dumplings. At that time, Cooper often worked overtime. Sometimes when he was too tired, he would call me and say, "Darling, let me hear your voice quickly, it helps me relax." In the early stages of his career, he faced a lot of pressure and often suffered from insomnia. In those moments, he would listen to me ramble on about various things until he could fall asleep. Back then, there were no mobile phones, and the wired telephone in the dormitory was inconvenient and could disturb others. So, I recorded many audio clips for him, reading in German, singing, telling jokes. If I were to describe our love in one sentence, the only thing that comes to mind is that we need each other. As Cooper put it, we are like X and Y in a quadratic equation. Without one of us, the equation doesn't hold. I really like that analogy. Our lives are inherently uncertain, but meeting each other, we become so certain. That kind of certainty where just thinking about each other brings a sense of stability to the heart. I still remember the first time I went to Tianjin with Cooper to meet his childhood friend Gavin. At a seafood barbecue restaurant in Tonggu, Gavin, who had just finished work, rushed over in a hurry. After Cooper introduced us, I said, "Hello," to Gavin. However, the Gavin whom Cooper described as one person equivalent to 1,000 sparrows actually forgot to respond to my hello. He just opened his mouth into an O shape and stared at me dumbfounded. Cooper had to pat him, and then he seemed to snap back to reality and said, "You two look too much alike." Really? I'm starting to doubt if you're siblings. Cooper and I exchanged glances. I'm not tall, he's 185 centimeters. I have double eyelids, he has single eyelids. My vision is 5.0, and he wears glasses with a prescription of -7.50. How do we look alike? At that moment, I jokingly said to Gavin, "Is this how you guys greet each other when you meet for the first time?" Gavin scratched his head and said, "How can I convince you? Zhong Xiaoma is simply the female version of Cooper." Then, the 3 of us began to eat and drink. After a night of good food and drink, when we were bidding farewell, Gavin suddenly seemed to come to his senses and said, "I get it now. The marital aura between you two is the kind that emanates from the bones, so similar. The way you look at people, the curvature of your smiles, the way you walk, even the posture of waiting at traffic lights is the same." My goodness, it's not me being presumptuous, but when I saw Xiaoma for the first time, I felt like I had known her for decades. Similar words were repeated when Cooper and I met each other's parents for the first time. It wasn't until then that we dared to affirm that we had the kind of resemblance that comes from deep within. Perhaps it's the similar family environment and upbringing, along with shared life experiences, that gave us this uncanny resemblance. Our love, Cooper's and mine, gained the approval and support of both sets of parents. In my senior year, while studying German, I received a job offer from a foreign company. We made a pact to take wedding photos together on the day of our graduation shoot. On March 27, 2007, at 7:18 in the morning, I was on the subway heading to my internship. In a fleeting moment, I suddenly felt a suffocating tightness in my chest, as if someone had a grip on my throat. Unable to bear it, I had to use the last bit of strength to get off at the next station. After getting off the train, the cold air hit me, and my heart felt as if it had been pounded with fists. Suddenly, I took a deep breath, tears streaming down my face for no apparent reason. After a while, I composed myself and got back on the subway. Within 5 minutes of arriving at work, I received a call from Cooper's colleague. During the moment when I couldn't breathe on the subway, Cooper, who was on a business trip to Shenzhen, collapsed in the elevator after working continuously for 3 days and nights. When I got off the subway with tears streaming down my face, the ambulance had arrived here, but Cooper had already stopped breathing. Less than 3 months from our university graduation day, on that day, I lost my love forever. In 2007, I experienced the first separation of life and death. There was no ancient road or pavilion, only within the span of one night, some people forever stayed in yesterday. And the true pain is sober and tearless. That day, I went to the airport alone to wait for Cooper's parents. I even remember going to the pharmacy at the airport to buy some emergency medicine for them. Accompanying them was Cooper's childhood friend, Gavin. We went to Shenzhen together to bring Cooper home. Even until I saw Cooper for the last time and bid him farewell, I didn't cry. At that time, a stubbornness was supporting me, thinking that if I cried, it would mean admitting that he had truly left. Moreover, facing Cooper's parents, who had lost their only child in their later years, I couldn't bear to cry. Under the guidance of the staff, I mechanically handled those cold procedures related to death. Then, I watched as Cooper, once a tall and sunny man of 185 centimeters, turned into a small piece inside a black box. We brought him back to Tianjin. Cooper's parents entrusted me to choose a portrait for his tombstone. That night, I stayed in Cooper's former room, flipping through all the photos from his lifetime. I liked every single one, and I couldn't bear to use any of them as a memorial image. Looking at his not particularly handsome but every expression that drove me crazy, do you know what I regret? I regret why we didn't live together before marriage like many lovers do, regret that I couldn't have a child with the person I loved the most. In the year when I was 22, I understood what it meant to send someone 1,000 miles, knowing that one day there would be a farewell. Cooper left, but the sun continued to rise, and life went on. After burying Cooper, as I left his home, I knelt in front of Cooper's parents. In the future, can I come to visit Cooper and visit you? I asked. Cooper was gone, but I didn't want to lose touch with anything related to him. This time, both of Cooper's parents endured the pain without shedding tears. They helped me up and made a request. You are always welcome in this home, but the condition is that you must live well, work well, and pursue happiness without carrying any ideological burden. This is our wish, and it is also the person Cooper hoped you would become. With tears streaming down my face, I nodded. At that time, I was not sure if I could fulfill their wishes. But one thing I was sure of, Cooper was gone, and from now on, his parents were my family. I cherish everything in this world related to him. Shortly after returning to Beijing, I graduated from university. My parents in Suzhou called me back home. I knew they were afraid that staying in Beijing would only add to my sorrow. Formerly, Beijing was the political, economic, and cultural center of the country for me. But now, it is the hometown of my youth and love with Cooper. I couldn't bear to leave. So, as agreed, I joined the company in Beijing. As a newcomer to the workplace, busyness and stress acted as a remedy for me. They allowed me to forget the pain of loss for a significant portion of each day. My rented apartment was near the university. During weekends, I could go for a run on the university's track, eat in the cafeteria where Cooper had taken me, and work in the classrooms where he used to study. During these activities, I never felt lonely. I felt that Cooper was still accompanying me. In the Chinese New Year of 2008, I went back to Suzhou to accompany my parents. On the third day of the Lunar New Year, I went to Tianjin to visit Cooper's parents. Despite preparing many comforting words in advance, they were all unnecessary upon meeting them. The elderly couple, who experienced the loss of their only child in their later years, had not yet retired. To my surprise, they not only continued their primary jobs but also took on a role as guest professors at a university, teaching twice a week. They revived their love for tennis from their youth and joined the senior tennis team in Tianjin, frequently participating in competitions across the country. They showed me photos from their competitions. Their work and lives seemed more fulfilling and enriched than when Cooper was alive. Cooper's mom said, "We think of our son every day, but we don't want to live in the sympathy and self-pity of others. That version of ourselves wouldn't be worthy of missing our son." Missing someone also requires qualifications. Every word and action of Cooper's parents made me both heartbroken and impressed, feeling their resilience and strength. Beijing is very close to Tianjin, and later, every holiday or when my mood was exceptionally low, I would go to Tianjin to visit them. Each time I saw them, it was a process of rejuvenation for me. Some friends advised me not to have too much contact with the past if I wanted to move on. However, I didn't want to go against my inner feelings. I didn't want to forget Cooper. I wanted to deeply connect with anyone or anything still related to him in this world. In those years, on several occasions when I visited Cooper's family, I encountered his childhood friend Gavin. After Cooper's passing, Gavin became like half a son to the family. Whenever the elderly couple needed anything, he was always ready to help. Unlike Cooper's reserved nature, Gavin was always talkative. In Cooper's mom's words, "Whenever Gavin is here, our home is filled with laughter and joy." Gavin was warm and considerate, extending his care even to me, Cooper's former girlfriend. He worked at Tianjin Customs, and every time he had a business trip to Beijing, he would go out of his way to see me and treat me to a meal. One time, Gavin called me while he was drunk. In the call, he cried heavily, expressing his longing for Cooper. He then shared countless anecdotes about their brotherhood from childhood to adulthood, lasting for 2.5 hours. By the end of the conversation, he was mostly sober. He kept apologizing, saying, "I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't bother you, but in this world, besides you, there's no one else I can talk to about Cooper. Since he left, I feel so lonely, without anyone to talk to." I cried too. Yes, our feelings about losing Cooper were mutual. Gavin's words were accurate. Without Cooper, our lives indeed felt very lonely. Life is vast, but finding the right person, someone you can share countless nonsensical conversations with, is rare. Even singular. It was the first time, after Cooper's departure, that I opened up to someone about the bits and pieces of our love story. Everyone is busy, and I don't want to overdraft someone else's time or consume their emotions with my sorrowful past. Moreover, human emotions are not always interchangeable. So, most of the time, I'd rather keep things sealed than disturb others. Thankfully, there is Gavin, allowing me to finally let go once and share those memories. For us, Cooper is someone we never need to consciously remember, yet someone we will never forget. I'm grateful that in this world, besides Cooper's parents, there is another person who can reminisce and share memories of Cooper with me. During the Spring Festival of 2012, following my usual routine, I spent time with my parents before heading to Tianjin on the 4th day of the Lunar New Year. When I arrived at Cooper's home, Gavin happened to be there, engaged in making dumplings with Cooper's parents. Since Cooper's passing, I found it hard to distance myself from this particular dish. Every time I participated in the process of making and cooking dumplings, consuming them in the midst of rising steam, I felt that nothing in the world carried more ritual and festive spirit than dumplings. Each time, silently in my heart, I would say, "Cooper, this culinary hobby you left me is truly wonderful. It makes me feel like I'm still someone who loves life." After finishing our meal that day, the four of us sat in the living room chatting. Suddenly, Cooper's mom addressed Gavin and me, saying, "As we've grown older, whenever your dad and I see children on the street, we can't help but be drawn to them. Our hearts melt, and we really want to hug them." Her words added a layer of fragility to the previously warm atmosphere. Gavin and I were unsure how to respond. Breaking the somewhat sorrowful silence, Cooper's dad said, "There's something I've been pondering with your aunt when we have free time. You two, unmarried and unattached, should consider each other. But I'm not sure whether I should mention it or not." I never expected that one day, the people encouraging me to re-enter the realm of romance would be Cooper's parents. Faced with the awkward atmosphere, Cooper's mom continued, "Regardless of whether Cooper is here or not, he is the person in this world who wishes for your happiness the most. And you too have experienced the departure of your dearest and loved ones at such a young age, so you should understand the value of cherishing happiness more than the average person. The last time I left Tianjin to return to Beijing, Gavin saw me off. This time, he didn't talk to me about Cooper, instead, he spoke about himself. He straightforwardly told me that before Cooper's departure, he was a staunch advocate of not getting married. Despite having been in 2 relationships, they were just that, relationships. It wasn't until he bid farewell to Cooper, witnessing the fragility of life firsthand, that he changed. He began thinking about marriage, wanting to have more than 2 children, desiring to live ordinary and trivial days like most people. He wished to combat the existential void of life with the most authentic and mundane existence. I hope that one day, when I'm gone, my children will come to visit me during the Qingming festival. I want them to tell their children, "This is your grandfather." He was a talkative person with a slight obsession for cleanliness. When Gavin uttered these words, tears streamed down my face. For 5 years, I hadn't spent a day without deeply pondering Cooper's premature departure. However, the advice from Cooper's parents and Gavin's aspiration for a simple and humble life made me realize, as if waking from a dream, compared to Cooper, we are all survivors. I have a responsibility and obligation to restart life and make it as vibrant and abundant as possible. Otherwise, what meaning does this extended life have been given by fate? After that incident, Gavin came to Beijing for 3 consecutive weekends. Each time, he did the same thing. He invited me to watch the re-release of Titanic 3D, 15 years after its original premiere. The first time revisiting the film, my eyes were moist from the moment I entered the cinema. The second time, I couldn't help but think, how wonderful it would have been if Cooper were still here to watch this classic with me. The third time, I didn't cry. I earnestly revisited every detail of the film. What brought tears to my eyes wasn't the separation and death of Rose and Jack during the sinking of the ship, but the murmured soliloquy of 90-year-old Rose at the end of the movie. After leaving the cinema, Gavin invited me for coffee. In the coffee shop, he took out his phone and showed me. Despite already watching the movie 3 times, he had recorded a video clip to show me again. I looked at him with confusion. He said, 15 years ago, I was moved by the love at first sight and the separation and death of the 2 in the movie. But now, what touches me the most is this part. I glanced at the video he recorded on his phone, which was also the ending of the film, depicting elderly Rose's memories. In that segment, Rose didn't express how much she missed Jack or how much she loved him deep down. Instead, she talked about her several marriages, her love for different people, the children she had, the numerous places she had visited, and how joyful and valuable her life had been. Gavin said, Jack's sacrifice was for Rose's life. She cherished Jack's sacrifice for her life, so she lived her life happily and meaningfully until she was 90. Then, he abruptly changed the topic, Xiaoma, life is unpredictable, and the days are not as long as we think. If possible, I hope to spend the rest of my life with you, building a family together, taking care of Cooper's parents together, facing the uncertainties of life together. Gavin's words were indeed persuasive for me at that time. How I wished to restart my life and live twice as splendidly for the sake of the departed Cooper. However, at that moment, I had never thought I could have love again in this lifetime. Gavin's confession suddenly showed me another possibility in life. Although he and Cooper had different personalities, their inherent goodness was similar. Regardless of whether it was the arrangement of fate or a jest, we decided to go with the flow, not betray our hearts, and cherish every day we were alive. In this way, I married Gavin in the spring of 2014. There was no grand ceremony, just a meal with both sets of parents and Cooper's parents, along with a family portrait. Half a year after our marriage, I changed jobs to a multinational company in Tianjin. In the winter of 2015, our son Xiaoguo was born. Watching over such a lively little life, Gavin and I were both moved to tears. He said, I really miss Cooper. I replied, me too. Cooper was not a taboo between Gavin and me. On the contrary, whenever we encountered many joyful events, or even just saw the first blooming flower of spring, we would sigh, how nice it would be if he were still here. When Gavin missed him, he would drive me to the places they played together in their childhood. And when I was feeling down, he would take me for a stroll on the campus of Lin University or treat me to a bowl of dumplings in the cafeteria. For us, Cooper was never a dead person but rather a part of our lives. Our residence is only 2 streets away from Cooper's parents. After retiring and being rehired, the first thing they do every day after work is to come and see Xiaogua. On weekends, the two elderly would replace my in-laws, helping take care of Xiaogua. They would discuss where to take Xiaogua for sunbathing, what books to read to him, what delicious food to make, and argue over who Xiaogua liked more. I absolutely love those scenes. It makes me feel that life and being alive are so resilient and beautiful. I admire everyone who can transform sorrow into strength. In 2017, our daughter Xiaoshuang was born. Due to my in-laws' poor health and my parents experiencing discomfort every time they came to Tianjin, two highly educated intellectuals who had dedicated their lives to engineering mechanics completely retired 2 months before Xiaoshuang was born. They immersed themselves in the scientific parenting field. They raised Xiaoshuang from scratch, taking care of her daily life, teaching her manners, loving without spoiling, often attracting other parents in the neighborhood to seek advice. In the face of external discussions about the complex family relationships in our home, we always brush it off with a smile. The depth of a person's enlightenment is precisely equal to the degree of suffering they have endured. Cooper's departure instantly clarified the priority of life for us. We don't care about others' gazes. What we care about the most is every day we live, whether we are worthy of the words alive, and whether we dare to have feelings and principles. I remember when Xiaoshuang first called Grandpa, Cooper's strong-willed father couldn't help but sob. He sent a WeChat message to me and Gavin, formally expressing his gratitude. Without you both, my wife and I would never experience the joy of playing with grandchildren in this life. It is because of you that our lives are full and beautiful. Even at our age, we still have the grand ambition to live another 500 years. Behind the words were 3 fist emojis. We have kept that WeChat message to this day. Every time we read it, the inner shock and emotion are always fresh. When the country relaxed the 3-child policy, I received news links from 6 sets of parents. Even my in-laws sent me a few baby names for reference. In fact, our extended family is not a supporter of the more children, more blessings theory. However, after experiencing Cooper's incident, we irreversibly fell in love with children, flowers, the sun, spring, and everything related to vitality. That day, looking at the names on the phone screen, each representing a family's hopes and expectations for the newborn, my heart was filled with serene happiness. Children are wonderful. Life is wonderful. Being alive is wonderful. Gavin, by my side, sighed, if Cooper could see all of this, he should be reassured. I replied to him with a tearful smile, we always remember him. He has never left us, he is happiness. Yes, those dearest to us, still harboring the deepest yearning for him, have transformed it into the warmest embrace for life. We have been striving to live out the profound and brilliant love for him in this life and beyond.